All right, we are back online, and if you are staying for class, come on in if you would please and have a seat, and we will begin our class. Last week, we finished up a study of the book of Joshua, and we're going to just do some kind of standalone lessons as we conclude out through the month of May, and then we'll pick up with something different as we begin our summer quarter in June. So this morning we're going to be in Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5. There was a man who often took a shortcut as he made his way home. He took a shortcut through a cemetery. And one night he was taking that normal shortcut through the cemetery, and he didn't know that a new grave had been dug recently, and he's walking along pretty much in the dark, and sure enough he tumbles in, and it's dark, and he can't see what he's grabbing, and so he struggles and tries to get out, but he can't. And so he decides, well, I'm just going to have to stay here for the night. When the light comes up in the morning, I'll be able to see and I'll find my way out. So he just settles down in kind of one corner of the grave. Well, an hour later, a farmer walks through that same cemetery. He's possum hunting. And he goes through the cemetery, and lo and behold, he falls in that same grave. And just like the first man, he begins desperately to try to get out. But he doesn't know this other guy's in the grave with him. Well, this first man who had fallen in, he watches and listens to this guy for a few minutes. And then he reaches over in the pitch darkness, lays his hand on his shoulder and says, "You can't get out of here." But he did. Terry Holler has the pouch. He's going to be passing that around again. This is for material for our Honduras ministry. Katie and others sew dresses for some of the girls in Honduras. And we take up a collection each Sunday to help pay for the material for that. So as that pouch comes by, if you have some money, please drop that in to help that ministry. Well, this morning we're going to talk a little bit about some strange things that happened in the cemetery in Jesus' day. Mark chapter 5, we're going to see what happened when Jesus showed up in a graveyard. Hey, Clint. There we go. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes, and when Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot. But he tore the chains apart, he broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. Ladies, this is the guy your mom warned you about. Okay? He's the one that police routinely lock up and whose face fills the screen on the evening news. Your mom would steer you away from this one, and so would the people who were his neighbors. The people in the region of the Gerasenes, they didn't know what to do with this man. He was a public menace, so they restrained him, but the restraints didn't work. He broke the chains. He sent chills up your spine with his cries and fear in your bones with his unpredictable actions. At least those were the reactions of the people who lived around him in the region of the Gerasenes and saw him. That was their reaction, but it wasn't Jesus' reaction. Pick up with me in verse 6. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." And then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on a nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go to them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down a steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Here's what I want you to notice first. Jesus' mere appearance in verse 6, Jesus' mere appearance humbles the demons. All right? Jesus' mere appearance humbles the demons. He saw Jesus, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. All right? The mere appearance of Jesus humbles the demons. They've dominated this man known as Legion. but they cower before God. Though they filled the entire region of Palestine with fear, they beg for mercy from Jesus. Feeling safer in a herd of pigs than in the presence of God, the demons asked to be sent into the herd of pigs. Now, the last time I referenced this text in a sermon, I made a corny joke about this being the first reported case in history of deviled ham. Okay? I would never stoop so low as to repeat that again. Also want you to note, though, that while Jesus handles the demons, the disciples watch. Did you even know the disciples were there? Did you even remember that they're actually mentioned in the story? While Jesus handles the demons, the disciples watch. Go back to verses 1 and 2. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. But now notice verse 2. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. I kind of get the idea. It's not said word for word in the text, but I think you can infer that when the disciples saw this demon-possessed man, they decided to stay in the boat because they came over together, but there's only one guy mentioned of getting out of the boat when they see this demon-possessed man. And if they did decide to stay in the boat, who could blame them? I mean, this guy must have been a sight to see. Scratched and bloody skin where he'd cut himself, arms probably flailing, voice screaming. The disciples decided to sit this one out and let Jesus handle it. And I asked you this morning, can you relate to that? Are there some things going on in your life? Are there some things going on around you that, like this demon-possessed man, they're completely out of your control? And because they're out of your control, you don't know exactly what to do with them. What things are out of control in your world today? Maybe it has to do with the economy. Maybe it has to do with what's going on politically. Maybe it has to do with the pandemic. Maybe it has to do with civil unrest in our country. But all of those things really are more on a national level. Let's bring it a little closer to home on a personal level. Where are things beyond your control? Are they out of control because of a doctor's report you just received? Are they out of control because the company you work for is downsizing and you're worried about keeping your job? Are things beyond your control because you've just lost someone to death, a loved one? Folks, we live in a world filled with things that are beyond our control. And so I urge you this morning, in light of that, we should do exactly what the disciples did in Mark chapter 5 when confronted with this situation that was beyond their control. Let Jesus handle it. When you encounter situations that are beyond your control, learn from the disciples in Mark chapter 5, let Jesus handle it. Let's say, for an illustration, let's say you have a neighbor, a next-door neighbor, and you and this neighbor have a tendency to have disputes and get into arguments over various things. Maybe it's an argument about the property line, or maybe it's something about a pet, or maybe his front yard looks like a junkyard. But you and your neighbor are ongoing disputes and arguments about various things in regards to your property. Well, let's say this neighbor of yours is a pretty big old boy. And you realize if this disagreement ever crosses the line and gets physical, that this big old boy is going to be able to pummel you. So let's say one afternoon you and this neighbor, you get into an argument and you can tell things are escalating and things are about to get physical. And just as he's about to take a swing at you, the heavyweight champion of the world shows up on your driveway. Tyson Fury shows up. And Tyson Fury says, Paul, let me handle this for you. Now, what would you say? What would you say in that situation? When we come face to face in situations in life that are out of our control, what God wants us to do is acknowledge His presence. We encounter situations that are out of our control. God says, acknowledge my presence. If Tyson Fury showed up in my driveway and there's a big old boy about to pummel me, I definitely would acknowledge his presence. I would say, yes, Mr. Fury, please take care of this situation. What good does it do to stew and worry about a situation that we have no control over? Like that neighbor, there are enemies in our lives and in this world that we are not going to be able to defeat on our own. But God can. The disciples couldn't defeat Satan, but Jesus could. So here in Mark 5, in the opening verses, you see them making a decision to let Jesus handle it. I suggest we do the same. As the disciples look on, Jesus goes into action, and God delivers a demon-possessed man from his misery. Some pigs receive the demons, and a disciple of Jesus is made in a cemetery. It really is an amazing story here in Mark chapter 5, but the story isn't quite over yet. If you think the demons wanting to go into this herd of pigs is bizarre, wait until you see the reaction of the people in that area. Pick up with me in verse 14. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and the countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. What? These people did what? They began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. These people asked Jesus to leave. Rather than thanking him for this demon-possessed man who had been a menace in their community, who now was dressed and in his right mind, instead of thanking Jesus, they dismissed him. Now, what would cause people to do such a thing? We like the things the way they were before you showed up. What would cause people to prefer demon possession over the presence of God? I don't know, but we do it all the time. Aren't people on a regular basis choosing their version of demon possession over God? For example, what causes an alcoholic to prefer drunken misery over sobriety? What causes a businessman to choose to continually cheat his customers instead of just being honest? What causes a church to choose meaningless routine over true revival? The answer is a fear of change. Why do people prefer demon possession over the presence of God? Because change is hard work. It's much easier to follow the old path than it is to move out into uncharted territory. And so I asked you this morning, are you choosing something in your life and in making that choice rejecting the presence of God? Is there something that you have decided, I would rather have this than have Jesus? In other words, what are your demons? Are you choosing alcohol or pornography or the love of money or greed or lying? What demons are you preferring? What demons are you choosing? Because you've grown comfortable with those demons. And you fear the hard work that would come if you truly allowed God's presence to change that aspect of your life. Hope you'll take a closer look at those demons this morning and recognize there's nothing in life better than Jesus. Through His presence and His power, your demons can be overcome. The people in Mark 5 didn't recognize that. They dismissed Jesus, and Jesus honored their choice. He steps back in the boat, and let's notice together what happens beginning in verse 18. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him. Kind of a strange way to treat a new believer, don't you think? This guy's just been converted. He's just been healed from his demons cast out. He wants to follow Jesus. He's a believer in Jesus. Why wouldn't Jesus take him along? Well, because Jesus had other plans, and you might even say greater plans for him. Jesus didn't let him, but he said, go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord's done for you and how He's had mercy on you. The man once possessed by demons is chosen by Christ to be a preacher. Didn't have any formal training, didn't have any extended teaching. All he knew was that Jesus was more powerful than the demons who used to make his life miserable, and apparently that was enough. So the man went away and began to tell the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. To me, in a way, more surprising than this former demon-possessed man being chosen to preach is the fact that anyone was chosen to preach. I mean, think about this for a minute. Would you have sent a preacher to some people who had just thrown you out of their town? You know, if I had been Jesus and I had gone in to perform this great miracle and I had helped these people overcome a community menace that they'd been dealing with for who knows how long, and I did them a favor and they treated me the way they treated Jesus, I might have sent them a plague, but probably not a preacher. But Jesus did, and he still does. He still sends the message to the unworthy, and thankfully he still uses the unworthy as messengers. And I, although unworthy, am honored this morning to bring you the message of Jesus. A Jesus who can handle the problems that are bigger than we are. A father just received in the mail one of his favorite Christian magazines, and he sat down to start flipping through and find some of the stories that he wanted to read, but as he was reading, his daughter Bethany was constantly interrupting. So finally, he tore a page out of the magazine, and on the page he tore out was a printed map of the world. So he tore that page into several pieces, gave the pieces to Bethany and a roll of Scotch tape and said, "Honey, take these pieces to the kitchen table and see if you can put the map of the world back together." Well, Bethany came back quickly, just a few minutes. She returned, handed the map to him, completely put together correctly. The father was surprised and asked her, "Well, Bethany, how'd you do that so fast?" "Oh," she said, "well, on the other side of the page was a picture of Jesus. And when I got Jesus in his place, the world came together too." Brothers and sisters, that's the message from this man in Mark chapter 5. When Jesus is in his rightful place in our lives, the world isn't nearly so daunting. We need to remember that in this world we live in today. When Jesus is in his rightful place in our lives, this world is not nearly so daunting. Because when Jesus is in his rightful place, we're going to do what the original disciples did. When they were confronted with a situation that was beyond their control, they let Jesus handle it. I pray we'll learn to do the same. Do you have a situation in your life this morning that you need to let Jesus handle? What problems, what demons are bigger than you that this morning you need to turn them over to him? Don't make the same mistake these men made in Mark chapter 5. Don't send Jesus away. Instead, invite him in and choose the presence and power of Jesus in your life. Let's close with a prayer. Father, we do praise your holy name. I'm so thankful for stories like this one in Mark chapter 5. Father, it's just a great reminder as we see this demon-possessed man who was just completely out of control, that no one in that region could gain control over. The disciples looked at that situation and said, "This is bigger than us. I think we need to let Jesus handle it." Father, how many times do we need to say that same thing on a daily basis? So many problems right now, Father, on a national level and on a personal level that are bigger than we are. But I praise you because there's none of them that are bigger than you. Father, help us learn from this story in Mark chapter 5. You are the one big enough to handle it. And Father, when we put Jesus in the rightful place in our lives, that's when this world is less daunting. So Father, as we begin this week, help us to do that. Help us to recognize who you are, your strength, your power, your wisdom, your might. And help us, Father, to put you in the rightful place on the throne of our hearts as the ruler and master of our lives. And Father, with you there, even though the problems are still very, very big, when you're in your rightful place, I recognize that you're bigger than anything I face. Help us to remember that, Father, this week. We praise you, ask for your strength and presence to guide us this week, and we thank you most of all for Jesus. In his name, amen. Appreciate you being here. Again, happy Mother's Day to all the moms. You guys go home and spoil Mom for the remainder of the day and the afternoon, and we'll see you next week.